I grew up in a home where silence was treated like wallpaper, always there, always unnoticed, yet shaping everything around it. My dad remarried when I was 12, and from the moment my stepmom walked into our living room with her bright smile and sharper eyes, I knew life had changed. She had the presence of someone who assumed every room existed for her entry. And slowly, quietly, she made it true. She had a habit of claiming things without ever acknowledging she was taking them. The living room became her relaxation space. The kitchen turned into her creative zone. Even my dad slowly shifted into her husband, as if the version of him I'd known had been overwritten. What she didn't take directly, she influenced through suggestion. And what she couldn't control, she dismissed. I learned early that my existence in the house needed justification. If I lingered in the living room, she'd sigh dramatically until I moved. If I cooked something, she would adjust it the second my back turned, as if my food wasn't fit for her shelves. If I brought home a good grade, she'd comment on how some kids only shine in school because they offer nothing anywhere else. Every remark felt like a thumb pressing down on a bruise. Dad rarely intervened. Not because he didn't care, but because he was slowly reshaped into someone who avoided conflict at any cost. I watched the change in him like someone watching water evaporate, subtle, gradual, and irreversible. My step-siblings followed her lead, seeing my quietness as an invitation to treat me like background noise. The only place I ever felt seen was at Grandma's tiny apartment across town. Her home always smelled like warm apples and freshly washed linen. She kept 2 teacups ready on the table, even on days I didn't visit, one for herself, one for me. "You don't have to make noise to make an impact, Maya," she'd always say. "Some storms gather quietly before they're powerful enough to change the sky." I held on to those words through the years. Through long nights studying while the rest of the house slept. Through whispered comments from my stepmom about how I was lucky to be allowed in a home like ours. Through birthdays where my presence was reduced to an afterthought. And through milestones where my achievements were treated like mild inconveniences. Graduation felt like the finish line of a marathon I'd been running alone. Grandma promised she'd be there in the front row, cheering the loudest. My stepmom barely acknowledged it. "It's more of a family event," she'd said, as though the diploma mattered less than the picture she planned to take. The graduation party was entirely her creation, decorations in colors she liked, catering from her favorite place, guests I barely recognized. But I still helped set up the tables, arranged the chairs, even helped light the outdoor lanterns. I had long accepted that work done by me rarely earned thanks, yet a small, foolish part of me hoped that day might be different. That maybe my dad would smile the old familiar smile he used to reserve just for me. That perhaps my step-siblings would say something real instead of something rehearsed. Maybe, just maybe, my stepmom wouldn't turn the day into another one of her performances. But as I looked around the backyard filled with people who were strangers to my story, I felt something shift. A coldness settling in the air. A tightening in my stomach I had felt many times before. My stepmom was preparing something. And this time, I could feel the weight of it before she even lifted her glass. Because when she tapped her spoon against the glass, I didn't just sense trouble, I sensed the moment my old life would end. The moment my stepmom tapped her spoon against the rim of her glass, the entire backyard shifted as though someone had dimmed the sun. Conversations softened, the music dipped into the background, and every guest turned toward her with the obedient attention she always demanded. She stood beneath the string lights like she'd been waiting her whole life for a spotlight. For a second, it almost looked like her graduation, not mine. She raised her drink with a broad, gleaming smile. "Since today is about new beginnings," she began, her voice carrying across the yard with the ease of someone who never questioned being heard, "I think it's the perfect time for an announcement." People leaned in, expecting something sweet, maybe a toast to my future, or a sentimental memory she'd pretend we shared. For half a breath, even I wondered if she might surprise me. But then her smile sharpened, and I recognized the expression she wore whenever she was about to cut someone down. "We're moving," she declared brightly. "Fresh start, fresh house, fresh energy." A few guests clapped, thinking this was some kind of celebratory update. But she added, pausing just long enough for anticipation to turn into discomfort, not all of us. The entire backyard froze. My stomach knotted. Her kids shifted, exchanging smirks they didn't bother hiding. My dad stood beside her stiffly, not meeting my eyes. She lifted her chin, savoring the moment like it was a performance she'd rehearsed. "We're moving without you, Maya." A stunned murmur rippled through the crowd. My name floated in the air like an accusation. She continued, her tone sweet and poisonous. "This house, well, it's too good for someone who contributes so little." She gave a careless wave of her hand, as if sweeping me out of existence. "You'll have to make other arrangements." People gasped softly. Some looked away, embarrassed to witness humiliation so public and so deliberate. Others, who only knew me through her carefully crafted stories, watched with a strange curiosity, like they were waiting to see how the character she'd invented would react. Her kids laughed. Loudly. One even muttered, "Finally," like they had been counting down the days. The heat in my chest wasn't shame. I was long past feeling small in their presence. What burned inside me was clarity, sharp, steady, undeniable. Because that announcement didn't just reveal her cruelty. It revealed her ignorance. If she'd been paying attention, she would have known she couldn't evict someone who already held the deed. I looked at my dad, hoping just once for him to step forward, say something, or shield me in the smallest way. Instead, he stared down at the deck as if he were a guest himself, unable to intervene in a story he'd allowed to spiral too far. Her friends laughed politely. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances. But none of them spoke up. I didn't give her the scene she wanted. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. Instead, I simply raised my head, met her triumphant gaze, and said calmly, "Have a safe move." Her smile faltered for the first time that evening. The party staggered on awkwardly afterward, as if unsure whether to celebrate or apologize. People approached me with stiff smiles, asking if I was okay. Though their eyes were filled with something closer to curiosity than concern, I drifted through the backyard feeling strangely detached, as though I were watching the night from behind glass. My stepmom basked in attention, reenacting her announcement with dramatic gestures, completely unaware that the ground she stood on was already slipping out from under her, because she thought I had no say. She thought I had no power. She thought I had no home. But she had no idea that for weeks, the deed had been sitting quietly in my drawer, signed, sealed, and completely in my name. Her performance wasn't my humiliation, it was her countdown, because when the party ended and I finally went upstairs, I opened a folder that would flip her entire world upside down. When the last of the guests finally drifted out of the backyard, leaving behind half-finished drinks and forced compliments, I slipped quietly into the house. The laughter outside still floated in through the open windows, sharp, mocking, confident. Confidence built on the belief that I was powerless, that I had no ground to stand on, that I would crumble the moment they pushed me out. But inside, the house felt strangely still, as if it knew something they didn't. I leaned against the kitchen counter and let the silence settle around me. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence I'd known for years. This one felt different, steady, grounded, waiting. I could still see my stepmom through the window, dazzling her friends with reenactments of her big announcement, basking in the echo of her own cruelty. She didn't realize that every boast she made was another rope tightening around her own feet. After a moment, I went upstairs to my room, the only space in the house she had never touched or decorated. She always insisted it wasn't worth fixing up for someone who wouldn't be around long. Ironically, that room was the only part of the house that actually belonged to me, even before the deed was signed. The lamp on my desk illuminated a small circle of warmth, and right at the center of it sat the folder I'd been building piece by piece for months. Quietly, carefully, patiently, I opened it. Inside were the documents that told the story she never bothered to learn, proof of my part-time jobs, my savings, my scholarships, the extra shifts I'd worked in college. The real estate contract with the previous owner. The payment confirmations. The deed with my name typed cleanly across the top in bold letters. I ran my fingers over the pages, remembering the nights I'd filled out forms while the rest of the house slept. The mornings I'd met with lawyers before class. The afternoons I'd slipped away to gather information she never imagined I could access. Buying the house wasn't revenge. It wasn't even a plan at first. It was security. My way of carving out something stable in a life where everything felt temporary. Her public announcement hadn't changed my future. It had just sped up the timeline. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. My dad's voice floated through the door, hesitant. "Maya, can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I didn't trust his reason for knocking. Was it guilt? Concern? Damage control? Probably control. "I'm fine," I finally said, keeping my voice calm. "You should get back to your guests." There was a pause long enough for me to imagine him standing there, torn between two worlds he'd chosen long before today. Then his footsteps faded down the hall. I exhaled, letting the last remnants of hesitation dissolve. Whatever doubts lingered in me had evaporated the moment he didn't stand up for me. The moment he let her humiliate me in front of everyone. The moment he prioritized peace with her over respect for me. I gathered every document into a single envelope. The weight of it in my hand felt solid, like a promise I had made to myself. Tomorrow morning would be clean, legal, and irreversible. No yelling. No begging. No dramatic confrontations. Just the truth, delivered through the one thing she valued most, paperwork. Before leaving my room, I took one final look around the posters on the wall, the desk lamp, the stack of books. Pieces of me she had ignored. Pieces she couldn't erase. I turned off the light, walked quietly down the stairs, and stepped outside under the moonlit sky. Tomorrow wasn't just a step. It was the shift of an entire life. Because at sunrise, a stranger would knock on our door and the envelope in his hands would end everything she believed she controlled. The next morning arrived with a brightness that almost felt disrespectful. Sunlight spilled across the front yard as if the world had no idea what was about to unfold inside the house behind me. I'd barely slept, not because of fear, but because of the clarity that had settled into my bones. Today wasn't vengeance, it was alignment. My life snapping back into place after years of being bent out of shape. I was already dressed and ready when the silver sedan pulled up at exactly 8:07 a.m. The process server stepped out with calm professionalism, a clipboard in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. He checked the address, then looked at me. "You the one requesting service?" he asked. I nodded. "Everything's in order?" "Perfectly in order," he confirmed, handing me the copy for my records. "Clean case. Straightforward delivery." He walked toward the porch with purposeful steps. And just as he reached for the doorbell, the front door swung open. My stepmom appeared in a robe, her hair pinned in rollers like wilted pink flowers. A mug of coffee dangled from her hand. She looked annoyed to see someone on her doorstep so early, but then she saw the envelope. Confusion flickered, followed by irritation. "Can I help you?" she asked sharply. The server held the envelope out to her. "These are for you." She took it, puzzled. "What is?" "You've been served." He stepped back, nodded to me politely, and returned to his car without dramatics. It was a professional exchange, clean and respectful, everything she was not. She stared at the envelope like it was written in another language. Then, curiosity winning over pride, she tore it open right there on the porch. Her eyes scanned the first few lines. First confusion, then a violent jolt of realization, and finally, horror. "What?" she whispered. "What is this? This isn't real." But the more she read, the more her face drained of color. My dad appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" She shoved the papers into his chest. "Read this. Just read it." He blinked at the letterhead, then slowly followed the printed lines with his eyes. Confusion turned to shock, then disbelief. "Eviction," he murmured. 30 days? But whose name? He stopped mid-sentence, eyes landing on me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. "Maya," he whispered. "Why is your name on the deed?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Because I bought the house last month." The words fell between us like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples were immediate. My stepmom's jaw dropped. "No. No, you didn't. You can't. This is my house." "It hasn't been," I said evenly. "Not for weeks." "You're lying," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You don't have that kind of money. You don't have the connections. You don't have control." I finished gently. Her kids stumbled onto the porch next, hair messy, eyes bleary. "What's happening?" one asked. "She's kicking us out," their mother screamed. Tell them what you're doing." "It's not kicking you out," I said. "It's following the law. I own the house. The notice is standard." Her daughter stepped forward. "You can't do this. We have lives." "That's why you have 30 days, I replied. "Everything is by the book." Dad swallowed hard, guilt settling into his expression. "Why didn't you tell me?" I held his gaze. "Would you have listened?" His silence was the answer. My stepmom's voice dropped to desperation. "We can talk about this. Fix this. Please." I shook my head. "This isn't punishment. It's a boundary. You said this house was too good for someone like me. So now, it's yours to leave." She stared at me, shaking, helpless, and for the first time I felt free. Because as they scrambled to gather their things, something happened inside the house, something that changed everything I thought I knew about my father. They scattered the moment reality sank in, my stepmom pacing in circles, her voice breaking between outrage and disbelief, my step-siblings arguing over what to pack first, my dad standing at the center of it all like a man suddenly aware of how small his influence truly was. But as the chaos swirled around the living room, something unexpected happened. My dad quietly stepped away. No shouting, no defending himself, no arguing with his wife. He slipped through the hallway and disappeared into the den, a room he hadn't occupied freely in years. A strange chill crept up my spine. I followed him, not out of fear, but because something in his posture had looked unfamiliar. Not panicked, not angry, resigned. When I stepped into the den, he was sitting on the old leather chair that still carried the faint scent of motor oil and aftershave, remnants of the man I once knew. Beside him sat an unopened box, the same one he'd tucked away years ago after marrying her. He ran a hand over it slowly, like he was reacquainting himself with something he thought he'd lost. He didn't look up when he said, "You bought the house." It wasn't a question. It was acknowledgement. "Yes," I replied softly. "Months ago." He nodded, still staring at the box. "Your grandmother knew?" A small smile tugged at my lips. "Of course she did." He exhaled a trembling breath, part sadness, part relief. I should have asked more questions, should have paid more attention. "You had other priorities," I said, not unkindly. His shoulders slumped. I let her voice become mine, even when it wasn't, even when it hurt you. "Dad," I stepped forward but stopped when he finally looked at me, really looked. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I'm asking for understanding. I made mistakes, big ones. And I know losing this house isn't the biggest loss in all this." For the first time in years, I saw the man who used to braid my hair, the man who once held me on his shoulders during fireworks shows, the man who taught me how to ride a bike. A man who disappeared long before today. She made me feel small, I whispered. And you let her. His eyes shone, but he nodded. I did. It wasn't an excuse. It was ownership. And strangely, that honesty eased something tight in my chest. He gestured toward the box. I've been wanting to open this for a long time. What's inside? He hesitated. Then, your mother's things. I kept them hidden because she said they were emotional clutter. Every time I tried to take them out, she made me feel ridiculous for wanting memories. A flicker of anger flared inside me. My stepmom hadn't just erased me, she'd erased my mother too. Silently, subtly, until Dad convinced himself he was fine living without reminders. Open it, I said. He did. Inside were photos of my childhood, handwriting from my mother, a bracelet she'd made me, and a stack of letters Dad had written but never sent. Letters full of love, fear, apology, longing. Letters meant for a version of me he thought he'd lost. A lump formed in my throat. You kept all of it. I couldn't protect you from her, he whispered, but I could protect this. For the first time in years, I stepped forward and hugged him. Not tightly. Not desperately. Just enough to acknowledge the truth. He had failed me, yes, but he had also found his way back. When we stepped out of the den, my stepmom was standing at the hallway entrance, eyes sharp with suspicion. What were you two talking about? She demanded. Dad straightened, not cowering, not shrinking, but standing tall. Things, he said calmly, that no longer concern you. Her face twisted in fury. And I realized something. This wasn't just the end of their stay. It was the end of her reign. Because just when she thought she'd lost everything, she discovered one last secret hidden in this house, and it wasn't mine or my father's. If looks could splinter walls, the one my stepmom gave us would have cracked the house in half. She stood rigid at the end of the hallway, arms crossed tightly around herself, like she was holding together the last scraps of control she still believed she had. Her eyes darted between me and my dad, searching for answers, searching for angles, searching for any foothold in a situation sliding rapidly out of her hands. What were you two talking about? She asked, her voice sharp enough to cut. Dad didn't shrink. Not this time. He stepped forward with a calmness she wasn't prepared for. Family things, he said simply. Her eyes narrowed. I am family. You were part of it, he said. But you don't get to demand explanations from us anymore. It was the first time I'd ever heard him draw a boundary with her. And from the way her jaw clenched, she had never heard it either. She opened her mouth to argue, but something behind us caught her eye. Her gaze dropped to the box, the one filled with my mother's things, still open on the chair. You could see her mask fracture. For years, she had acted like my mother's memory didn't exist, like the woman before her was a footnote she had the right to erase. Now that footnote stared back at her in ink and photographs. What is that? She demanded. Dad's voice stayed firm. Something you should have left alone. Her lips curled. You're digging up ghosts now? No, he said. I'm remembering who I was before you convinced me to forget. Her composure cracked visibly. You two think you're the victims? After everything I've done for this family. I stepped forward slowly. Everything you've done was for yourself. The rest of us were props. Her daughter appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a blanket, still groggy. Mom? The car's packed. We should go. But my stepmom didn't move. Instead, her eyes flicked towards something down the hall, the linen closet. The one she always kept locked. Something tightened in her expression, a strange, flickering panic. Dad noticed. What's in there? Her face froze. Nothing. His brow furrowed. Then why lock it? She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Dad walked past her and reached for the closet handle. She lunged forward, grabbing his wrist. Don't! That one word, too sharp, too fast, too desperate, made the air shift. Dad pulled his hand free. I think it's time we open it. She backed away, shaking her head. You don't understand. It's private. No, Dad said. You made everything private. Everything yours. I think we should see what's in the one space you guarded harder than anything else. He opened the closet, and inside, on the shelves, tucked between neatly stacked towels, were dozens of items that didn't belong to her. Photos, jewelry, receipts, medical papers, small keepsakes, all of them familiar, all of them mine or my dad's, some from my childhood, some from my mother, items that had gone missing over the last decade, things we'd each assumed were lost forever. My breath hitched. Dad's voice cracked. You took these. She pressed a manicured hand to her chest, feigning innocence. I was organizing, keeping things safe. No, he said slowly. You were erasing us, one piece at a time. The truth lay between us in a pile of stolen memories. Her facade shattered completely. I was trying to make this house mine, she screamed. Is that so terrible? Yes, Dad said coldly. When it costs everyone else their sense of home. She stood there trembling, trapped between rage and desperation. And suddenly, I realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing the house. She was afraid of losing relevance. Because hidden behind those stolen memories was something else. Something she never meant for either of us to find. Something that explained everything she'd done. Dad knelt slowly before the closet shelves, his hands trembling as he picked up each item. My mother's gold bracelet, a photo of the three of us at the beach, one of my childhood drawings, even the small silver ring he thought he'd misplaced a year ago. These weren't random objects. They were crumbs of our past. Pieces of a life she wanted wiped clean. My stepmom hovered near the doorway, her breathing quick and uneven. I kept those safe, she repeated, her voice thin with panic. You're twisting everything. No, Dad said, his voice thick with disbelief. You hid them. 4 years. He pulled out a stack of old greeting cards, some from my mother to him, some from me to her. Every single one had disappeared mysteriously over time. He opened one slowly, recognizing the handwriting instantly. His shoulders shook. She made me think I was forgetful, he whispered. Made me believe I misplaced everything. I felt my heart crack. She did the same to me. My necklace, my sketchbook, even Grandma's birthday card. My stepmom snapped. You two always blew things out of proportion. I was organizing the house. It was clutter. Clutter. Dad echoed, lifting the bracelet. This is Maya's mother's. Her face hardened, guilt replaced by defensiveness. That woman is gone. I was trying to help you move on. You don't get to decide how we grieve, he said. You don't get to erase her to make room for yourself. But something told me we weren't finished. My gut pulsed with the uneasy sense that the real secret wasn't the items in plain sight, but something deeper. Dad searched the upper shelves first, then the side compartments. Nothing unusual. But when he reached the bottom shelf, his movement paused. His fingers brushed against the back panel. It wasn't flush. There was a gap. A hidden compartment. My stepmom's breath hitched audibly. Leave it, she said quickly. Too quickly. Dad looked at her, then at me. And without hesitation, he pulled the panel forward. Behind it sat a thick binder and a small metal lockbox. My stepmom lunged for them, but I stepped in front of her. No, I said firmly. Whatever's inside, We're looking at it. Dad picked up the binder first. It wasn't dusty. It had been accessed recently. Often. Inside were handwritten notes. Hers. Dozens of pages filled with observations, complaints, and meticulous records of every argument, every missed chore, every moment she could weaponize. Not about him. About me. She kept files on me, I whispered. Why? Dad flipped through the pages quickly, growing paler with every line. They weren't notes. They were strategies, plans, ways to turn him against me, ways to influence what he thought, how to make her seem irresponsible, how to position her as ungrateful, when to bring up money so she feels inferior. Don't let her have keepsakes, they attach her to the house. My stomach dropped. She hadn't been reacting to insecurity. She'd been executing a plan. Dad's voice cracked. You manipulated me. She straightened, mask falling back into place. I kept this family functioning. Someone had to. That's not functioning, I said. That's control. Dad opened the metal lockbox next. Inside were more papers. Bank transfers, private messages, a copy of a letter she'd once claimed she never received from Grandma. She'd intercepted it, hidden it, and at the very bottom, a letter written in my mother's handwriting, one Dad had never seen. His fingers trembled as he opened it. The room fell silent. What is that? I whispered. It's a letter she wrote, he said, voice breaking. For you, for when you turned 18. My stepmom paled. I was going to give it to her eventually. No, Dad said, tears rising. You were never going to give her this. She took a step back, cornered by the truth spreading from the closet like a flood. Everything she'd done suddenly made sense. She wasn't trying to replace my mother. She was trying to erase her. But when Dad finished reading the letter, we realized my mom had left behind a truth even bigger, and it changed everything we thought we knew about this house. Dad held the letter like it was made of glass, fragile, precious, dangerous to mishandle. His hands trembled as he unfolded it carefully, revealing my mother's familiar handwriting. Even after all these years, her curves and loops felt like a warm hand on my shoulder. The sight alone made my throat tighten. My stepmom hovered near the doorway, eyes darting wildly between us and the letter, as if hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something less incriminating. You don't know what that says, she insisted, voice brittle. Don't jump to conclusions. Dad ignored her. He took a slow breath and started reading silently, his expression shifting line by line. Confusion first. Then shock. Then a grief so raw it forced him to take a step back. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were full of tears. Maya, you need to read this. My pulse hammered as he handed it to me. My mother's words flowed across the page, steady and gentle. My sweet Maya, if you're reading this, it means you're stepping into adulthood, and I am not there with you in the way I hope to be. But I want you to know something important. Something I told your father to protect, something you deserve to inherit. My breath caught. Dad's hand covered his mouth, shaking. I continued reading. This house, the one you grew up in, the one filled with our memories. It's yours when you turn 18. We agreed on it before I got sick. I made him promise. He signed the papers. This home belongs to you, my daughter. My vision blurred. If anything changes, if anyone tries to make you feel small in the place that shaped you, remember this. You are the rightful owner. You always were. Tears slid down my cheeks before I realized I was crying. The words felt like a hand reaching through time, reminding me that I was never forgotten, never replaced, never unwanted. Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I should have told you, he whispered. But after she passed, everything got blurry. And then, He looked at my stepmom, not with anger, with realization. My stepmom's mask crumbled. "You can't believe that letter," she said desperately. "It's old, outdated." She was emotional. She didn't know what she was saying. Dad stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You hid this because you knew exactly what it meant." Her silence was the confirmation. He sank onto the edge of the bed, the letter still in my hand. "Your mother wanted you to have this house," he said softly. "Legally, emotionally, every way that mattered." My breath shook. "So even if I hadn't bought it, it still would have been mine?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, she wanted you to feel safe, to always have a home." A wave of grief and comfort washed over me all at once. The house that had witnessed my humiliation was meant to be my foundation all along. My stepmom had spent years trying to strip me from a place that was never hers to own. "You would have kept hiding it," Dad said to her. She lifted her chin. "Of course I would've. If she knew the house was hers, she'd never leave. How do you think this family was supposed to work? With her clinging to the past? With me living in someone else's shadow?" "You married into that shadow," Dad said. "You lived here. But it was never yours to claim." Her eyes flashed with something dark. "You're throwing away years of marriage for a letter from a dead woman?" "No," he said. "I'm throwing away years of manipulation." For the first time, my stepmom had no comeback. No smile. No performance. Just silence. The same silence I had lived inside for years. Dad turned to me, voice steady. "Your mother trusted me with this. I failed to honor it. But I won't fail again." I folded the letter gently, my hands still trembling. "What do we do now?" Dad stood, eyes firm with a resolve I hadn't seen in ages. "We finish what you started." Because the house wasn't the final secret, there was one more truth hidden beneath it, one my mother hinted at in a coded line at the very end of her letter. I unfolded the letter again, reading the final lines slowly. My mother's handwriting shifted, still gentle, but more deliberate, as if she had been choosing every word with purpose. "And Maya, if the house ever feels heavy, if the walls echo with anything but love, look beneath the floorboards in the room where you took your first steps. I left something for you, something to remind you that you were never alone in this place." A coded line. A message buried in time. Dad's breath caught. "Floorboards? Which room?" "The old nursery," I said quietly. "My old room." The three of us, me, Dad, and the broken remains of my stepmom's pride, moved down the hall. The door to my childhood room creaked open like it hadn't been touched in years. The wallpaper was faded, the window cracked slightly, but sunlight still warmed the space. It felt different now, less like a storage room, more like a whisper from the past. Dad knelt near the corner where the wooden planks met. "She must have meant this spot." I dropped to my knees beside him. My stepmom hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, but the mask she usually wore had been stripped completely. What remained looked strangely small. Dad pressed gently against the first plank. It lifted slightly. My heart pounded. Together, we pulled up two boards. Underneath, wrapped in a soft cloth, lay a small wooden box. My hands shook as I lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked, polished smooth by time. Dad swallowed hard, his eyes reflecting the same fear and hope swirling inside me. "Open it," he whispered. I did. Inside the box were several envelopes tied with ribbon, letters written for different stages of my life. For when you graduate. For when you feel lost. For when you fall in love. And one labeled, for when the house no longer feels like home. My chest tightened painfully, and beneath the letters was a folded legal document, old but official. Dad took it carefully, scanning it with widening eyes. "It's the original transfer agreement," he said softly. "Your mother signed it." "I signed it. The house was legally meant for you from the beginning." She even included a clause preventing future spouses from altering ownership without your consent. My stepmom's face drained of color. She planned this? She planned to freeze me out. "No," I said, shaking my head. "She planned to protect me." Dad nodded. "She knew what she wanted for her daughter, and she trusted me to honor it." "You didn't," my stepmom snapped, desperate for anything to grasp. "You forgot all about it. You let me run things. You—" Dad cut her off. "I forgot myself, too. But Maya buying the house, that was fate protecting her when I didn't." A tremor went through her. "You can't just throw away this marriage." "It ended the moment you tried to erase my daughter," Dad said. His voice was quiet, but solid as a foundation stone. "And the moment you dug up a life you never helped build." She didn't argue again. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she realized she had lost something far bigger than a house. She backed away from the room, her breath shaking, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely small, diminished not by anyone else, but by the truth she could no longer twist. Dad rested a hand on my shoulder. "Your mother didn't leave you alone," he said. "She left you a voice, and you finally used it." We returned the floorboards gently, letting the past settle back into place. Not hidden, just honored. That night, after everyone was gone, I sat in the living room surrounded by quiet. Real quiet. Not fearful. Not suffocating. Peaceful. The house felt different now. Lighter, warmer, finally mine in every sense. I opened the envelope labeled, "For when the house no longer feels like home." Inside, my mother had written, "Home isn't walls, Maya. It's truth. And you will always find it, even when others try to bury it." For the first time in years, I believed her. Because little did I know, owning the house was only the beginning. The next letter contained a truth that would change not just my future, but my entire family's history.